Hi, my name is Mia. Welcome to Scrubs and Savings. I'm a 21-year-old new grad registered nurse, documenting how I'm living intentionally, spending joyfully, and giving generously. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about how I passed the NCLEX in 85 questions. I wanted to share this video to pay it forward to my fellow nursing school students and nursing school graduates. I watched a lot of these videos while I was in nursing school and preparing for the NCLEX and thought they were always very helpful, not only in the test taking strategies, but kind of motivation wise as well. So I graduated nursing school at the end of April of 2025, took a week-long vacation. I got back on May 12th and scheduled myself to take the exam on June 16th, which gave me about 5 weeks to study. But after a few weeks of studying using my study plan, I felt ready to take the NCLEX a little earlier and actually took it on June 12th. Now, I only used 2 resources while I was studying, which were the Archer Review question bank, as well as the free 12 Mark K lectures that you can find on some forums on the internet. I'm probably not going to share it in this video, but I know a lot of people share it out there somewhere. As for my study schedule, fortunately, I didn't have to work full-time while I was studying, but I did work part-time, so I was studying about 4 to 5 days out of the week for about 5 to 6 hours a day, and I always made sure to take Sunday as a rest day. So on my first study day, I took the Archer Review Baseline Readiness Assessment, and I received a borderline result on it, which honestly made me a tad nervous, but I had plenty of weeks to study. So on a day-to-day basis, while I was studying, I would take a practice exam in the morning, which were either the 85 question readiness assessments, which predicts how likely you're going to pass the NCLEX. And after my first readiness assessment, I received 14 very highly likely results from those. And on the alternating study day, I would do a 150 practice question test. And after I took either of those tests, I would read through all of the rationale of each of the questions and answers, just to make sure that my thought process behind even the questions that I got right were correct, and the way that the NCLEX wants us to answer and critically think for each of the questions. Then I would take about an hour-long study break, eat lunch, hang out with my dogs, do whatever to kind of reset my mind. And in the afternoon, I would listen to a Mark Clement lecture. Now, I know these lectures are a little bit long for some people, but I thought they were very helpful to review the bigger topics that I haven't gone over in a couple years, even like with med-surg or patho or fundamentals questions. And also, he was very motivating during these lectures, and a lot of what he said comforted me a lot while I was taking the exam, especially lecture 12, which was about prioritization, delegation, staff management, and test-taking strategies. If you only have time or energy to listen to one lecture, that is the lecture I would recommend, because I could literally hear him go over which patients are stable or unstable in my head while I was taking my exam, which is a little creepy, but also very helpful, and it worked out. And then at the end of each study week, on Saturday mornings, I would take a computer adaptive test exam, which most similarly replicates how the NCLEX actually looks, and I passed all of those CAT exams as well. So by the 3rd week, I was feeling very good about where I was at, pushed up my study date, and I finished all of the Mark Clement lectures at that point. So I was just doing practice exams every day and remediating. So definitely as time went on, I focused more on my test taking skills rather than reviewing content. So I pushed my study date up to a Thursday instead of a Monday, So during that last week on Monday and Tuesday, I replicated how the test is going to feel as much as possible. I did 2 CAT exams bright and early at 8 a.m. I went to my public library, but it actually was closed that early in the morning, so I did end up taking the exams in my car, but honestly, it did kind of replicate how quiet it was because it was so early in the morning and I was just completely locked in on the test. And I know everyone recommends doing this before your exam, and I highly recommend it too, because if I didn't do this, I would have been highly anxious on the day of my exam otherwise, which is to not do anything related to the NCLEX or nursing at all the day before the exam, and just do things that really nourish you, like watching your favorite YouTube videos or movies or whatever makes you feel good and relaxed. Then on test day, I really tried my best to get enough sleep, but funnily enough, I probably only got 5 hours of sleep from anxiety, but I really just meditated, prayed a lot, like leaned on talking to my parents in the morning, made sure to eat a good breakfast, and drink my coffee early enough to where I wouldn't buzzed while I was taking my exam. And I got to the testing center early, and I made sure to go to the bathroom and kind of talk to the people that were with me. We were all taking the NCLEX together, making sure to foster a sense of peace while we were taking the exam. So one thing I really wanted to take care of while I was preparing for the NCLEX was to take care of my mental health. Now, I'm a pretty good test taker. However, I knew that my anxiety could get the better of me while I was taking the NCLEX, and I wanted to make sure that I was in a good mental space while I was studying and while I was taking the test. So while I was studying, I made sure to take a lot of study breaks, and even on days where I just felt super overwhelmed and anxious and tired, I knew those study days wouldn't yield a lot from me, so I just took those days as rest days and moved on. I would also make sure that I was eating and hydrating well enough, getting enough rest every night. I tried to get at least 8 hours of sleep, as well as moving my body every single day that I was studying to get myself in a better, clearer headspace during my study days. So that is what I did to prepare for the NCLEX, but I also wanted to share a few test-taking strategies that I implemented while I was studying and while I was actually taking the NCLEX. Now, first and foremost, that we all know that the NCLEX is a safety exam, so even if you don't know what's going on, always ask yourself what is the safest option, which is normally whichever one is least invasive. And when it came to individual questions, like individual patients, I would ask myself what would do the least harm to my patient. And if it was a prioritization question, this is a little morbid, I know, but I would ask myself, who is going to die if I don't do anything about it right now? Which I felt like it really helped while I was getting overwhelmed during those types of questions. Tip number 2 is to make sure to read every single word that is in your question, in the answers, and in, if it's a case study, in the little text box they give you, because even just one word can completely change the correct answer to a question. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information that is in a question, take a step back, close your eyes, deep breathe, and reread the question and ask yourself, what is this really asking? It's very easy to get overwhelmed during the exam. So after every case study question, I would literally close my eyes, stretch, and breathe, because I knew that if I didn't, I would probably get even more anxious. Then tip number 3, for case study questions and select all that apply, it is better to underchoose than to overchoose. Meaning, I got very familiar with how the questions are scored, and I noticed that you get more points if you only pick the answers you know to be true because you get credit for those, and sometimes you get marked down if you pick answers that aren't correct. So I wanted to make sure that I selected answers that I was like 95% sure that were true. Then tip number 4 is to treat every answer like a true or false statement. So let's say you have answers A, B, C, and D. Reread the question and ask yourself, is answer A true? Is answer B true? Is answer C true? And honestly, that took me a really long way while I was taking the exam. And then number 5, please trust your gut. You have worked so hard to get to this point. You graduated nursing school, you got your authorization to test, you know everything that you need to know to pass the NCLEX. Along the lines of trusting your gut, my 6th tip is to only change your answer to a question if you are sure that the answer that you are changing the answer to is correct. Because again, you've worked so hard and you've studied so hard, and even subconsciously you pick up patterns of which type of answer the NCLEX is looking for different types of questions. Number 7, I think I already said this, but again, if you feel overwhelmed or don't know what's going on in a question, take a deep breath and reread it, and you will probably find a little bit of clarity on what the question is asking you. Number 8 is to be mentally prepared for the NCLEX to be 150 questions long. Now, I know the ideal is to get to 85 questions. I know that personally I would have gotten very flustered if I went past 85 questions. So be mentally prepared to take all 150 so that you won't feel that sense of anxiety while you're taking the exam. I think there's also an option where you can hide which question that you're at on the exam, and that might be useful if you feel like your eye is moving towards what question you're at, because I was definitely feeling a little bit more anxiety the closer and closer that I got to 85 questions. Tip number 9 is something that I wish I abided by, which is to not set any expectations of what's going to be on your exam, and also to not expect to know everything that's on your exam. I know that it's very tempting to be hopeful for certain types of questions on your exam, and I think it only, for me, led to frustration, disappointment, and anxiety when I didn't get the types of questions that I wanted, even though the NCLEX can really throw anything at you, really, and it's just about safety at the end of the day. And honestly, while I was taking the exam, I honestly felt like a good amount of things were not things that I really got to review or didn't really focus on while I was studying. And that's okay. You're not going to know everything. It's really just about drawing from your knowledge and drawing from safety. That's the biggest thing that you can think of. And then tip number 10 is to remind yourself that you got through nursing school and you can get through this too. You've worked so hard to be at this point where you can take this exam, and it's just the last thing that's in your way of stepping into your career. I really hope this video was at least a little bit helpful for those of you that are going to take on the NCLEX, and I really appreciate you watching this video all the way through. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, because I have so much nursing content coming up, because I am going to be stepping into my career next month, and I'm so excited to share more of my nursing journey with you guys. Thank you for watching. Bye, guys.